All right, welcome to Words of the Wise. Today we have Sergeant Kevin Murie from Cottonwood PD. He has been on the job for 19 years, and wellness is a huge part of his life and his career. And so I'm really, really excited to have him on the show today. Welcome. Thank you
All
so much for
right,
being
Paige.
here.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm glad to be here with you this morning.
Awesome. Well, I want to jump right in. I want some background on you. I know you've been on the job for a long time. How did you get into this line of work? What made you want to be in law enforcement?
Yeah, so I started in 2004, almost early years of 2004, and um, it was because of my father. My father was in law enforcement. He worked for the Arizona Highway Patrol for did it for 30 years, and so that was really kind of what got me into it. Coming out of high school, I had two older brothers that were in the military, and I remember calling them one day, and they were like, "Hey, yeah, don't come in the military. It's not all it's cracked up to be. They lie to you." So I was like, "Okay, I'll just go the law enforcement route." So right after high school, I did 2 years in our dispatch center for Cottonwood PD,
Awesome.
and then got sent to the academy, and ever since that's where I've been. So my total time with the agency is 21 years, and 19 of that has been sworn now. So yeah, that's kind of how I got going into this.
That's amazing. And so you have a number of different perspectives. You have the perspective of being related and a child of someone who is in law enforcement and seeing how that impacts family life. And then you have the perspective of being a dispatcher.
No doubt.
And now you have the perspective of, not just being an officer, but now in leadership. And so I'd love to kind of dive into that a little bit and get a grasp on, how was it being the son of someone in law enforcement? Did you see the job impact your home life, or was it something that was kind of rose-colored glasses, and something that you maybe didn't know a ton about until you actually got into the career?
Sure. Well, good question. My mother was actually also into law enforcement, so she was a
Oh, wow.
dispatcher for the majority
That's amazing.
of her life. So there was no getting around it, right? I mean,
Mm,
the law enforcement profession was in our family, and it was put out there. There was, my dad was working shift work, my mom's working shift work, and um, so there was really no getting around it. They weren't able to really hide it. I would say that there absolutely was some um, negative effects towards that piece. And then back in that day too, there wasn't a lot of wellness talk at all, right? I mean, you were just
mhm.
expected to be, and this is from my dad's perspective. You were just expected to be this manly man, and everything gets put, by the wayside, and you don't ever mention it again. And even when I started my career back in 2004, or even we'll say in dispatch, even in 2003 era when I started there, same thing, right? Same concept of you were just expected to kind of shelter those things and keep them quiet, I guess. And so,
Mhm.
yeah, growing up, it was I knew what my parents did. It was going through life as a young adolescent male. I got bullied a lot because my parents were in law enforcement. It was like, oh,
Mm,
talk to him. His dad's a cop, kind of thing. And not bullied to the extent of like physical abuse, but it was all
sure.
the mental stuff. Lack of friends for sure. Because of it, everybody was kind of, or I should say everybody, but a lot of people were into that, I guess, party scene in their high school days. And so
Mm,
it's like,
mhm.
oh, don't invite him. His dad's a cop. He'll tell, so that was all. It was dealing with all of that, right? I mean, and then working my way back up into actually starting in my career. I'll even back up even further, a little bit before dispatch. When I was in high school, our police department had what was called an Explore program at the time. As my junior year of high school, and I joined the Explore program, and we were required to wear, these light blue uniform shirts with uniform pants, and we would go help out at different events. And even then, right, I would see kids that I went to high school with, and they're looking at me in this, bright blue uniform shirt, pretending to be in law enforcement from their perspective, and
Mhm.
that continued too, right? I mean, so you kind of get that bullying there too, and so yeah, just it was always there, right? I mean, that and for so long you have to keep that kind of sheltered in your mind, and eventually it will come out though. Eventually it comes out. So
Yeah, and that's so interesting. I don't know if I've ever considered that perspective of struggling because because like you said, everyone's like, dad's a cop, don't be friends with him. But
Mhm.
also, it's something that you were really striving to be. And so, not only did you have to kind of compartmentalize it and, shove down the things of,
Sure.
your
Mhm.
personal life, but you also had to advocate for yourself and say, no, this is actually a path that I believe in and that I want to pursue, even though my peers are
That's right.
making fun of it or don't believe in it. So that's a really interesting perspective. And so you did eventually, persevere and you got into the career and you started as a dispatcher.
Mhm.
How was that? Because we know that dispatch is incredibly stressful
Mhm.
and they take incredibly stressful calls and work long hours and are tied to their desk. How was that for you from a mental perspective?
Yeah. So the nice part is we're from a smaller agency, right? So uh, interestingly enough, during that time, I had actually worked shifts by myself in dispatch.
Okay.
So there wasn't, I didn't have a partner to talk to. I'd bring in my, game console and play video games when things weren't busy. But what was important to me was the officers on the road coming in and having that communication point, because
Mm,
we take the 911 calls and we dispatch them out to these calls. And a lot of times you don't get to close that loop as a dispatcher, so you don't know what happened. And so it was important for those officers to come in and have that conversation and ask them, hey, what ended up happening with that? Whatever it might be. What was that? It sounded really interesting on the phone or really scary on the phone, but how was it out there when you're dealing with it? And so getting that closure sometimes was important, and it didn't happen all the time. So
mm,
and you're talking to, I remember one specific call I got where this gal was talking to me about she wanted to jump out a second story window and kill herself. And here I am trying to keep her on the phone while I'm also dispatching officers and fire department employees to that scene. And she didn't end up jumping, which was great, but I still wanted to have that closure from those guys on the
mm,
scene, or guys and gals on the scene, to tell me what was happening and what were they telling that lady, because you will never get that closure.
right.
So it's very important, and it's a huge stress point for them even today, right? Even though wellness, so we talk about wellness and that mental side of it, with officers or with dispatchers or whoever it might be, that still exists today, and they still have that problem. So we here at Convo, we encourage our officers to go in and have those conversations with dispatch, and even if they're not asking for the information, give it to them anyway. Tell them how those calls went, because that'll at least provide some of that closure to them. Because you don't, myself having sat on both sides, I can completely understand how that can go bad for them in there, and they can get really burnt out when they don't have that closure. So
100%. And do you think that that's normal practice? Do you think that a lot of agencies encourage that? Or do you think that that's something unique that you guys do and something that you've kind of learned just from being in that position?
I would like to think that most agencies encourage it, even if it's just a phone call, right? I mean, we're a small agency, and our dispatch center is housed here at our main police department, and so it's easy for us. It's easy for officers to go in there. However, at larger agencies, it might not necessarily be easy for those officers just to stop in on their dispatch centers and have that conversation. So we're fortunate in that area. But even a phone call sometimes would go a long way too, right? If you can build those relationships with your dispatchers, and that becomes a very important thing. And God forbid there's an officer emergency or something like that, where an officer is injured, those dispatchers are the lifeline, and
Right.
oftentimes um, that can even ruin them, their mental side of it too. So super super important in my mind to have that, and I hope most agencies are offering that to their officers and dispatchers.
Yeah. And I love that you mentioned making them feel a part of the team. Because I think organizationally, sometimes everyone kind of feels like they're on their own little islands and there isn't that team wellness or that team support. And I think that wellness comes in so many different ways. And, just like you said, someone coming in and closing the loop, that's wellness.
Mm-hmm.
That's, taking that stress and that mental burden off of someone who is wondering what happened. So I love that as a piece of wellness of like, hey, it's a team, we work together, they're the lifeline, they're helping us out. they're stressed as well, and we need to be able to help them in any way that we can,
Yeah.
even if it's a simple phone call and letting them know that, that person didn't jump and they're good.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I love
Exactly.
that. I
Yeah.
love that.
Super, super important. Super important. And it's nice because I have both perspectives, as you mentioned
Hmm.
earlier. It's like, not everybody has that opportunity or that ability to have that, and it's nice because I do have that, and so it makes it good and easy for me to have conversations with officers or our supervisors to say, hey, make sure you're continuing that conversations and those communication with the dispatchers because it is super important.
Yeah, 100%. So you move from dispatch and
Mm-hmm.
you become a sworn officer. I know you said that when you started, wellness wasn't really a thing. And now we have, growing up, and like you said, you have um, you know, the the things that you shoved down as a kid, right? The
Mm-hmm.
bullying and then you advocated for yourself. Now you're in dispatch and now you have that cumulative stress that you're kind of piling on top. And then you enter into your career as an officer and there aren't a lot of wellness resources. And so I know we talked offline, but wellness has become a big part of your life in your career. And so tell me a little bit about that. How did you start down your wellness journey as an individual to help with that cumulative stress?
Yeah, sure. So, back in the academy, I remember being in the academy and I had a recruit training officer who actually knew my father because they worked at the same agency for a long time. But, um, he had mentioned to our academy class, he was up there talking to us and he had mentioned about how, when we're out there on the road and you're dealing with, citizens or you're trying to arrest a bad guy, for instance, they'll size you up. They will look at you, and something that goes through their mind is, can I take this person? If they didn't
Mhm.
want to go to jail, can they take this officer? Can they get out of this? And so that's something that stuck with me and still sticks with me today. That I didn't want to be that person that because we always talk about the officer presence, making sure your boots are shined and that you look presentable and that you're looking confident, right? And I didn't want to be that officer who didn't display that confidence from the get go because, well, let's face it, we have a family to go to. Early on in my career, right, it was just me and my parents. I wasn't married then; I didn't have kids then, and so, but they were my family, right? So I had a family to go home to. I lived with them, even as a matter of fact, for my early days in being law enforcement. So I didn't want to jeopardize that, and so that always stuck with me and what he said, and so that really kind of began my journey. Now, granted, it took me some time, right? Because you get out of the academy and you got to go into your field training, and there's a process of learning the job. Even though I had been in dispatch, I still had to learn this job, and so
Mhm.
part of that process of learning, I wasn't in the gym, I wasn't into fitness for probably a good 2 years. So I realized though that there one bad incident, one time with somebody that is going to look at me and say they can take me, I can fight that guy. I wasn't going to be that person, and I didn't want to
Mhm.
put my coworkers in that position either to have to defend me. So that's what started it, and I'll be honest, it wasn't running fitness, it wasn't anything like that. It was being in the gym and lifting weight. That was how my journey started. And I'll say that today too. It still exists today. I still am in the gym almost every single morning. It's a lifting routine for me. I play basketball 2 nights a week, so that's my cardio piece to it. And I'll even run occasionally on the weekends when I don't play basketball. But and there's more that has built over the years into that wellness piece of it. But my firm belief is that the mental side of it comes and gets better when you have a physical piece to it too, because it's your escape. You can kind of get away from the busyness and just focus on yourself for call it 30 minutes to an hour, however long you're in the gym. But so that's kind
And
of how that started.
and I love that you said that because I completely agree. And I think that a lot of people don't understand that the physical and the mental are interconnected.
Mm-hmm.
They go hand in hand. And that's why when you feel bad physically, you usually feel bad mentally. And then when you feel bad mentally, you don't want to do the physical. And it's like this snowball effect. And so I think you're 100% spot on. I think that an easy way to start down any sort of wellness, even if it's mental wellness, is starting with the physical. Start with the physical, and that'll impact your mental, and then you can go from there and add on and progress from there. So I
That's
love
right.
that.
That's right.
what is, and I know that you mentioned a few things, but if you had to say one thing now, actually, let me ask you two questions. And you can tell me if it's changed. So, in the beginning of your career and then now,
Mhm.
what is your why when it comes to wellness? What is that like driving force? And I know you mentioned a few things, and maybe it looks different now than it did then.
Yes.
But was there one thing that you were like, this is definitely my why? This is why I prioritize this proactively?
Yeah, well, you're exactly right, Paige. So over the years, it does change, right? And it's okay. It's okay to change your why. And so early on, not really having a family, not having kids, and my why was the people that I worked with, that I surrounded myself with, because again, I didn't want to be that guy that
Mm.
was, easy to fight, and now they're having to defend me and take care of me. My why then was, all right, I'm going to switch the role here, and if somebody else is going to need me, I'm going to be that guy. And so that was my why then. But as your career changes, as you move up, either whether it's through the ranks of seniority, whatever it might be, as your career changes, job tasks change, your why changes. And of course, I got married, had kids, so my why became now protecting them, both while I'm at work and when I'm at home. I am their protector. That's how they have to see me, and so that's how they should see me. You don't have to see me that way, but that's how they should see me. And so that's become my why now. I would say I did about 17 years on our SWAT team. It's a regional team, part time, so we're not huge busy or anything like that. But there was a point in my career where, again, my why became making sure that if we went into a house, and somebody was injured, one of our officers was injured, I could get them out in their full gear. And you're talking sometimes that's 250 plus pounds of gear. And so that became part of my why too, right? I have to be strong enough to get this person out of the residence. And I encouraged our team members too, that they had to be the same way. They needed to be strong enough to get me out, because at the time I was the biggest and weighed the most. And so, I was probably 300 pounds in my gear. And so they needed to get me out of that house. And so that, your whys change over time. And as I sit today in more of an administrative role, my why is my family. And I do it because of that. I do it because I'm in an administrative role. And a lot of times you're sitting most of the day behind a computer, and that takes a toll on itself. And so you're,
Mhm.
you're not as active anymore out on the street with the guys. And so again, another change in my why of why I'm doing it. I have to maintain my mental wellness, because I sit behind a desk most of the days, and I have to be able to, maintain that. And I get that through the physical, exertion of working out.
Thank you for sharing. I really appreciate that. How important, because there's this idea, and I've had these conversations where, um, and maybe you can attest to this, where when you're trying to get buy-in and we're trying to, create a culture of wellness and, you know, provide resources that are utilized. And there's this idea of, well, we can only do so much. We can only lead, to water, but can't make someone drink type of mentality.
Mm-hmm.
How important do you think it is for everyone to have their own why and their own driving force? Do you think it comes from within, or do you think that it comes from outward organizational push?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think that, there's, and that's kind of where I come from too. Is I try to inspire our employees to do
Mm,
something extra. There was a period that my wife is a yoga instructor. I've been to her practice multiple times. There was a point in time when I was going 3 days a week, and probably one of the most beneficial times of my life, quite frankly, in my fitness and wellness journey, because the benefits, you don't realize the benefits until you're there. And so when in that time when she first got into that, I was looking at it like, this is not for me. This is a women's thing. It's
right.
not for men. You get that macho piece to it, right? So that's how I looked at it originally. And as I evolved and I had gone to classes, I started getting our officers to go to those classes as well. And because I saw the benefits, there was other firefighters from other local fire agencies that were in there also. And I remember talking to one of the guys about how this has saved him. That practice alone has saved him from having back injury or back surgery. I'm sorry,
Hmm.
because he had long lasting back stuff, and that's a pretty prominent thing in law enforcement too. When we're wearing gear around our waist and vests and everything else, that happens in our career field too. And I can also attest to the fact that I've had back issues and I've had to that practice alone, right? So I say I kind of squirreled there, so I apologize, but I think the two-part question there, internally and externally, right? There has to be, I think, an influence from others that you surround yourself with, coupled with an internal drive and motivation to want to change also. And so, and I think they kind of both go hand in hand. And if the influence piece there, from the people that are around you, if they are helping promote and sell the benefits of it, I think it makes the internal piece of each individual, it makes it easier for them to actually buy into it. So hopefully that answers your question, but I think I think they both go hand in hand, but I think you need both.
It does answer my question. And I love that you said, I try to inspire. And without saying it, you said, I lead by example.
Yeah,
Right. And so
there you go.
by leading by example and saying, hey, I'm going to focus on my wellness and I'm hoping that the things that I do help to inspire and motivate and create that culture for other people, then that's great. And I think that so often, we have conversations where, organizations are like, yeah, we have all these things, but no one in leadership is doing them.
Yeah,
And so then it everyone else is like, well, if they're not going to do it, then I'm not going to do it. And so I agree that there has to be a little bit of both. But I love that you said that. Like, I just try to lead by example and inspire people to try different things and to
yeah.
prioritize their wellness.
It's almost like having a succession plan too, right? I mean, you could look at it that way, where one day I'm not going to be here. I won't be sitting in this seat. I won't be at this agency anymore. I'll be retired, hopefully. And so who's that next person? Who did I inspire enough to take my seat now to help in the wellness game, right? In our agency, because it is really that important. There was a stigma that surrounded it for a long time, and I think we're starting to see that slowly go away, which is also super important. And so that's where I'm at, and it feels good. It does. It feels good to be that inspirational piece for somebody.
Yeah, and I agree with you that the momentum is going in the direction of wellness. When I started this 8 years ago, there was a lot of head scratching and exactly what
Mhm.
you said. They're like, cops don't do yoga and yoga's woo-woo and feminine and now we have individuals like yourself and those that you mentioned before that are going and doing these things and they're like, it saved me from surgery. And, it saved me from medical retirement or whatever it is. And so I do agree with you that the momentum is trending in that direction, which is great.
Yes,
And I think the more we have these types of conversations, it makes it normal and makes it okay
absolutely.
to prioritize your wellness and to try different training methods that are maybe a little bit outside the box.
Sure. Yeah.
So with that being said, I know that you said, you started with lifting and getting stronger, and then you've kind of added things over the years, and yoga's been one of them. But I'd love to hear what training methods have you used over the years, and which ones do you think have been the most impactful for your overall wellness, whether that's physical or mental?
I think, well, the lifting piece has been super impactful. I think for me, and for when I was in my younger days of starting the lifting, I would always follow the big bodybuilders and see what they're doing because I thought, oh man, that's got to be the best. And that has even transitioned now where it's more, being smarter about my lifting. I'm not trying to go in the gym and lift all the weight that they have. It's now just more like maintenance, working out. And I think that's the transition that I've made. But I think that's been a super important piece to me is that lifting, because you do get some cardiovascular workout with lifting also. And
Hmm.
so it's kind of a twofold practice for me. And then incorporating yoga too, for me has been super, super important. I don't, you know, with all transparency, I don't get there enough as I should be because of work schedules and kids and everything else. But I would say that has probably been one of the most important pieces to my, probably even more so than the lifting, quite frankly, because the benefits that come out of that are, I couldn't, you can obviously speak to it, but I can't even go into all the benefits that are there. I just experience them. And I swear, even if I wasn't trying to be the yogi person, the stretching, I mean, even when you're lifting, right? When you're lifting and your muscles are getting tighter and you're contracting all those muscle fibers, the stretching piece to yoga in itself is huge benefits. And so again, people avoiding surgeries and long lasting injuries because the stretching of those muscles. And for a while, a long time, I had no idea that a lot of your muscles are interconnected throughout your body. And so when you stretch different pieces of your body, you're really kind of getting all of that. And so I'd say the lifting and then yoga had really, come into play. And then for me also, super important is, outside of any of that, is like a sport or a hobby for me. And that was basketball. We came in from basketball. For a while it was pickleball, and then I kind of got out of pickleball and went back to basketball because that's been my passion for years. But that's been super important for me too, because it's different. It's just different now. It's not lifting, it's not yoga, it's, some exercise in there, and really getting my mind outside of anything that has to do with work, period. And that's, I think, also super important.
And let me ask you, when you play basketball, is this with a group of individuals who are in law enforcement, or is this a
Yeah,
completely separate?
completely outside. There's a couple firefighters that I know locally that go and play, but it's a group. There's probably about 20 or 30 of us, but at time we only invite 12, a couple nights a week. And so there's about 12 of us that show up, and yeah, it's just not any of them. Well, none of them are from law enforcement. I'm the actually only law enforcement guy there,
Mhm.
but there's some fire guys that go and play, but super beneficial again, because now I'm really separating myself from work entirely, or I don't have anybody there that's from law enforcement. And I could go into a lot of reasons why that's important too, but it's super important to expand your network, and not just focus on the people that you surround yourself with on a daily.
Yeah, and I'm really glad that you mentioned that because that's been something that I've heard across the board of, advice for wellness of like have friends and have
Yes.
other things that are outside of law enforcement because we know that it's easy to, with any career, but I think especially in this career, it's easy to wrap your whole identity into one thing. And when you can realize that your job is a piece of you and not the whole picture, that's important. And so by, like you said, diversifying and having things outside where you're like, I'm not thinking about work, I'm not associated with that. Like this is me.
Yes.
I'm the one who is, as a person who is playing this basketball game right now, not
Exactly.
law enforcement me, So
Yep.
thank you for
Exactly.
sharing that. I appreciate that. So, okay, so we kind of went through your history. We know growing up, and then as a dispatcher, and then going through the academy, and then becoming an officer, and now you're in leadership, and you have the opportunity to lead by example and to inspire your team and inspire the future generation, and put in place programming that's going to help with their physical and mental wellness. And so I would love to get your insight and feedback on, um, some things that you think would be beneficial for organizational wellness. If someone's listening who's in leadership, who's, wanting to build a wellness program or, just as a way to share ideas of things that you think, would be really beneficial to incorporate as a department.
Yeah, we're kind of in our infancy stages with our agency about, trying to seek what wellness we want to initiate, like organizationally.
Mm.
But I think what it takes too is identifying one or two or more, maybe more individuals that is their passion and they want to run with it, because they will tackle it for you. They will get something in place for you. And we currently have that right now. We're kind of brainstorming some different ideas and seeing what's out there for us to really incorporate organizationally, because it's twofold, right? You have your individuals, and they'll do what they want to do for themselves, but organizationally we have to have something too.
Mhm.
And so I think it's identifying those individuals who have a passion for it and can do the research. And I happen to be one of them for our agency. And then we have one of our dispatch supervisors who is also very passionate about wellness. and they look different. Um,
Hmm.
because of my role and because of her role, those ideas look different. And so now it's us brainstorming what can we do? Because most municipalities or organizations will have like an employee assistance program, right? And through those programs, through your insurance, you might have only a few, like we'll just say therapy visits or something like that would be beneficial. But outside of that, there's really not a whole lot there. And so it takes having ideas, communicating, sitting through webinars or whatever it might be to see what would work for our agency organizationally. And so, but super important, I think, to identify those employees that are interested in it, that have a passion for it, and use them as the catalyst to make sure that this gets going, because super beneficial for sure. So that's kind of where we're at. And so still in the infancy stages, but trying to identify what those programs might look like to get our employees more engaged in their overall wellness.
Yeah, and I think that the idea of choosing, and I'm going to say leaders, because when you appoint people to spearhead a program, they become the leaders of that. And so choosing from different roles, I think, is a really good strategy because you have different perspectives. And I love that you also recognize that it takes effort to get this off the ground. And you do need people who are like willing to put in that effort and to get these things off the ground, because it's trial and error, and it's trying to figure out what works. And yeah, I love that concept of, like, one, we need people who are like eager and passionate, but then
Mhm.
two, have different perspectives so that we can make sure that you guys are speaking to the entire agency, because everyone's going to be different.
Sure. And they have to be connected too, right? I mean, they have to be those have to be the inspirational people that can get that buy-in from even the higher ups, the ranks, and then from the line level employees too. They have to be inspirational to get the buy-in from them too. So another important piece.
100%. So I want to ask you one more question.
Sure.
And we kind of talked about this offline, but I, I think the common thread is inspiration. How do we inspire not just, not just leadership, or how do I want to phrase this? And I can cut this too. Um, we know that we want to inspire future generations, right? We want to keep that momentum of wellness going. And we know that historically there really weren't any wellness programs in place. And we know what happens. We know the injury rates, we know suicide rates, we know that the life expectancy after retirement. These are all common numbers that I think everyone is familiar with by this point. And so this is why there's, such a push for wellness. And, the more that we can normalize and the more that we can have these conversations, then the more, like you said, we're going to inspire future generations to also prioritize those things. And so if there was one piece of advice that you could give to the younger or the future generation when it comes to wellness, maybe something that a mentor told you that really gravitated towards, that's helped you in your career, or maybe something that you wish you would have listened to, what would that be?
Um, one of the things that has always stuck with me too is every day that you're not focusing on a piece of wellness, your competition is. And
Mm,
so, and you can take that a lot of ways, right? In the law enforcement world, when we're first responders out there on the street, I originally, when that stuck with me, it was I saw a picture of a guy in a orange jumpsuit in a prison cell, and he was just huge, muscular guy. And I'm looking at this, and the comment underneath it, the meme was, "Every day you're not in the gym, this prisoner is," kind of thing. And so
mm,
I attribute that as like every day you're not doing something focused on your wellness, your competition, or your nemesis, your enemies are. And so we have a responsibility to ensure that the services that we provide in law enforcement or in first responder in general, right? Fire, police, everything, dispatch. We have a responsibility to make sure that we're providing the best service we can. And And that's organizationally and that's individually. And so that's what I would say is that every day you're not focused on something that is good for your wellness, then the people we serve are suffering, or they are getting better than you. And so it's just that would be, I guess, my best piece of advice. And I tell the younger, when we hire new officers and younger, or send them to the academy, I tell them that. I said, look, every day you're not doing something to better yourself, your competition is, and the people that we deal with are becoming better than you. And hopefully that sticks with them. Hopefully that's something that they can buy into. So
Yeah, that just got me hyped.
yeah.
Honestly, like, and I think that without you knowing it, you're creating more mental strength and resiliency in that way of like, I'm gonna push because if not, then,
Yes.
and you're attaching to that like emotion of like if I don't do it, someone else will, and if I don't do it, then I'm not the best version of myself that I possibly could be for me, for the community, for my family. I'm hyped. I'm gonna go to the gym right after this.
Yeah, there's been a couple that I've heard over the years that have always stuck with me. Obviously, that was one of them, and then I can't remember exactly how it goes, but essentially every day is day one.
Mm,
Whereas you get a lot of excuses. Oh, I'm going to start tomorrow, and I'm going to start tomorrow, and I'm going to get in there tomorrow, and I'm going to do this tomorrow. And if that's all you're ever going to say, that all you're doing is giving yourself an out. And so
mm.
it's every day is day one, and you have to start somewhere, right? You have to get in and do something. And it doesn't even matter what it is, right? I mean, it's every day is day one. And um, so there's another one for me, I guess, that always stuck with me too, is if we can constantly and just keep those in our head, and constantly remind ourselves that even if my intention is to go to the gym for an hour or go to a yoga class for 75 minutes or whatever it is. If that's my intention, but I only get 10 minutes in there, that's at least something. It's better than not going at all and making excuses for myself and why I didn't, and making myself feel better. Um, Something's better than nothing. So
I completely agree. And I might be a broken record at this time, but my thing is small steps lead to big change or to big impact. And I think that so often, maybe it's human nature, or maybe it's just us in like this space, but I think so often it's like all or nothing, and it's like if we can't do, 7 days a week, then it's not worthwhile. And it's like, no, like if you could do one thing for 10 minutes, one time a week, that's better than nothing. And then eventually you can build on that without feeling burnt out. And I think that you're right. Like a lot of times we convince ourselves, like, oh, it's not even worth going. But it's like, yes, it is. Even if
yes,
you walk around your block
that's right.
for 5 minutes and just get out into, the sunshine. I know it's kind of cold right now, but, get outside, fresh air, breathe, and just like turn off your phone and just walk for 5 minutes. It's better than nothing. And so I 100% agree with you. And I love that. Every day is day one. Just
Yeah,
do it,
and
do something.
you said something also that was very important, and that was that some people think that, okay, well, I'm just if I'm not in there for my hour, I'm wasting my time. What's important to know though too is that your body needs rest too, and so it's okay if you get into a routine of going to the gym, whatever it might be, going to yoga, gym, whatever your routine is. If you get into that routine and there's one day that you miss, it's okay, because
Mhm.
your body needs that rest, and really that's your body telling you need rest. And so I think that's important too. And I try to remind myself of that. Typically I'm in there almost every day doing something, but if for whatever day or whatever reason I might miss, it's okay. It's my body telling me I needed that rest, and because that's also good for the mental well being as well. So just
100%.
hugely important.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing. I really do appreciate your time. Is there anything else, any last words, anything that we missed that you wanted to share before we sign off for the day?
Gosh, I just hope that our conversation today helps somebody somewhere. I know that this has been a super important conversation for me to have with you, and I do appreciate your time and allowing me to come onto your podcast. I know it's something new for you, and it's my first podcast ever, so I just appreciate that opportunity. And hopefully, anything that I've said or we've said today helps somebody somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Anytime, anytime. Glad to be here.